Hey everybody, welcome to another video of Helmets of the World. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Dutch KNIL. I'm not even going to take a stab at that, but that's what it looks like. It translates to Royal Netherlands East Indies Army. And that's what this helmet was called. There isn't really a numerical value that I've found that's official. It was called the Model B when it was in production, but that's about the only time you're going to hear that detail because that's how relevant it is to the history of this bad boy. So in 1927, the Dutch adopted an official helmet called the M27. It was designed prior to that and saw limited use. So some people call it the 2327, but that's not what this video is about. Anyway, they did adopt that helmet, and it was weird because right after that, the what is it called? The Dutch Ministry of Colonial Affairs, and then some people in the Defense Ministry asked for a version of the M27 for the KNIL troops that featured a brim or skirt or whatever you want to call it, this part right here, that was about an inch or 2 centimeters shorter than the standard M27. If you don't know what an M27 looks like, it kind of goes down farther in the back. Not quite as far as an M34, but I'm just telling you that as a reference point so you can kind of see how and why this helmet was designed this way. This was basically, they wanted the skirt shorter to allow for easier prone shooting. Something that I guess wasn't really important for the troops back in the Netherlands, but I digress. Up until this point, KNIL, I'm going to get that one of these times, had been wearing kind of like black pith helmets, tropical cloth hats, they called them or whatever. But they were very similar to like the British Home Service helmet. They were black and they were tall and all that stuff. They provided like absolutely no ballistic protection whatsoever. So fast forward to the 20th century, specifically the late 1920s, and this helmet began to be produced after it was designed in about 1930. So the very early models, the first approximately 40 or so, had vent holes in them. So they had, for tropical environments, because they were under the impression that it was going to be very hot in what is now Indonesia. So that's, if you didn't know where the Dutch East Indies used to be, that's where it's located, so in the South Pacific. Actually, yeah, it'd be the South Pacific, I guess. Or maybe. It's Indonesia. All right, we're just going to move on. I'm confusing myself. And anyway, so they had vent holes in the helmet, but of course that's going to compromise some ballistic protection. So only the first 40 or so that were ever produced had those holes. And so if you find one of those, it's extremely rare, but most of them do not have the vent holes. And then the Dutch Ministry of Colonial Affairs ordered about 45,000 of these helmets to be made. They weren't all to be made at once. It was to be spread out because the KNIL military force wasn't as big as the Dutch army was at that point, so they didn't need as many. And they were producing the M27 at that point, and starting in 1934, they were producing the M34. So this is kind of like a trickle thing. About 4,000 of these were produced and delivered by like early 1939, so that's how kind of slow they were making them, pumping them out. The production started to increase on like the M34 helmets instead of this one due to the rising tensions in Europe in 1939. And in late 1939, after the Second World War began, steel became a very, very hard commodity for the Dutch to acquire, leading to a lot more delays in their regular helmet manufacturing, and specifically this one. And because they were prioritizing the 1934 helmet, so in the end, about 28,000 of the requested 45,000 had actually been made and sent to the East Indies by the Netherlands at that point, at late 1939. Actually, no, it was early 1940, because then the Netherlands were invaded by the Germans, and production ceased after that happened. So after that, the exiled Dutch government kind of realized that Japan was probably going to invade the East Indies, so they ended up contracting with a really strange company, I guess, and kind of a local one to me, the Milwaukee Saddlery Company, or Milsco, Saddlery. That's a hard one to say 10 times fast for me. So yeah, Milsco from here on out. And they were based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So these helmets, the way to tell a Milsco helmet, which this is, from the Dutch one, is there is no badge on the front. There's no Royal Dutch, I don't remember exactly what it looks like, but they had a badge. There's no badge on the Milsco ones. So It's very interesting. They actually started producing a lot of these pretty quickly in about 1941-ish, and between late 1940 and 41. And most of those helmets actually made it to the East Indies and were used in fighting with the Japanese, because the Japanese did eventually invade. And just a little brief history of the KNIL. It consisted of about 40% Dutch soldiers and 60% of native Indonesian soldiers. So they were actually fairly considered like an elite force. The world recognized them. And they fought as hard as they could against the Japanese, but they were overwhelmed. And in 1942, they surrendered the East Indies. And some KNIL troops escaped to Australia, and then they tried to fight, for the rest of the war. But most of them were actually captured by the Japanese and spent the rest of the war in POW camps. And it's estimated that approximately 25% of those soldiers died. And it was the KNIL was disbanded in 1950 when Indonesia became independent. So we're going to take a look at the liner and talk about that just a little bit, and then we'll think about wrapping this video up. So again, I was very, very pleased to find one of these in original configuration, much less in this good a shape, and you'll see why. So this liner was designed by somebody who probably hadn't been to the tropics or didn't plan on going there. So you can see, obviously it's a steel helmet. When you're wearing a steel helmet in the really hot sun, like it's very hot in that part of the world, you don't want to have your head touching it, and you want to try to minimize the radiant effect of the heat. So that's why this really thick, like orange felt pad was thrown in there. And then you got the leather band to actually hold the liner into the helmet via these split pins that are, I think there's 6 or 7 of them around the helmet. There's quite a few. There's some in the back, and that holds the neck flap in. Now, that might look a little familiar to some of you other helmet collectors out there, and we'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, you've got this leather flap that's supposed to go down over the neck, and it honestly, if you know anything about hot, humid climates, it's just going to make it harder to wear this thing. It's going to be hard enough already without it, being able to really breathe because of this cloth. You're going to have sweat accumulating up there. But it appears that, I guess a lot of the KNIL guys liked that leather flap because it gave them a little protection from the sun on their neck. So yeah, it's very interesting, just the kind of design. There aren't any markings on this one, but another way you can tell it's a Milsko liner is that white aluminum. I believe the Dutch use steel. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I was led to kind of believe. And there's not a lot out there about these helmets. That's what's really cool about these, and I'm trying to get as much info as I can out there. These were also issued to the Dutch Navy quite frequently, so you're going to see a lot of them that are either Dutch made or Milsko manufactured that actually have like an anchor either painted or like an actual soldered or I guess what is it called? Soldered or brazed badge, like it's an anchor with a rope around it. So it's a pretty interesting thing too, that these were extensively used by the Dutch Navy throughout the Second World War. Yeah, so that's all I've really got on this. It's a really unique helmet, and if you want to really get into it, I'll just tell you really quick why I said does that look familiar on the neck flap, is because if you know anything about the Romanian helmets, they used the M34 until about 1973. And they came out with the Model 73 and then the later 7380, which is the same thing without the badge on the front. And it is designed off of this helmet, not the original M34. If you look at it in Romanian M7380, it looks like a rim or a raw-edged version of this helmet, the exact shape and everything. And they took that little leather flap in the back and put a smaller version of that in the Romanian M7380 liner. So it's a very interesting thing to kind of see. This is the actual helmet that the Romanian M7380 was designed off of. It was more compact, and again, you can shoot a lot easier from prone. And there's a reason the Romanian 7380 is still being used today around the world. It's a decent design. But anyway, that's about that. I already made a video on that a while back. This is a really cool helmet. They're really hard to find, guys, and I was really lucky I placed a bid on this at an auction, and I did not think I was going to win it, and ended up winning it. And it was like, okay, this thing's in great shape. I don't know if this one was ever used. The chin strap's a little dry, but that could easily be from storage. This is one of the more rare helmets I have, but oh, excuse me. A lot of people don't know what these are, and they don't really care about them, which worked out great for me. So anyway, I'll stop bragging now. I'm just really happy to have this in the collection. I was showing Devin K this, and he was like, holy crap, it's in really good shape and everything. And so he was pretty happy about this too. And they're very hard to find, especially in this condition. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it's kind of opened up your collecting eyes a little bit. Sorry about the constant light adjusting in here. This phone is just irritating me lately with the lighting. But Anyway, here, I'll try to turn this down just a tad so it hopefully stops adjusting. Okay, anyway, I'm going to wrap the video up so you can just stop watching. Thank you again, guys. I really do appreciate it. If you consider becoming a supporter on Patreon, the link to that is in the description. It's $1 a month, which is about $12 a year, or it is $12 a year. And $5 a month or more, it gets into my Discord server. It does help fund the channel. I am able to get really cool things like this, and I've got some really cool stuff coming that I'll be making videos on soon that my patrons made it possible for me to get. I can't really afford to be funding the channel and getting all this crazy cool stuff from around the world with out-of-pocket expenses, so Patreon really helps offset the cost for that to educate you guys on really cool military artifacts and weapons and stuff like that. So thank you for watching. If you consider becoming a supporter, that would be great. And if not, I totally get it. And I really just do appreciate you viewing this. If you got any questions, I'll try to answer them. I'm not an expert on this one because there's not a lot of info out there. Anyway, I'm done rambling, I swear. Thank you for watching, everybody, and we'll see you on the next episode of Helmets of the World.